What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the Deborah Al YouTube channel. We're back with our top 5 series. We've made it all the way down to number 4. We are talking about the Texas Longhorns today. We're going to go on over to the 2024 preview, diving into the recruits, what they got this season. Are they a national title contender? Can they challenge for an SEC title as they're in the SEC there? And all of the above, going over every single thing you can think of for the 2024 program. But let's go a little bit deep last year. What they did 12-2. They finished third in the AP poll. When they're looking at the season, they did very, very good. Conference record 81, Big 12 champions on their way out, going to the SEC. Their two losses, though, when you're looking at it, were Oklahoma and that last drive for Dylan Gabriel out there, and into Washington, a game they should have won. I think offensively, I think if they had a couple of those drives there, they could have easily been playing for a national title. That's how close Texas was last year. Now, they did lose some on the defensive side. We're going to get into that. But overall, they were very, very solid. Sark had them rolling, and Texas is back. We can finally say that there. Quinn Ewers last year, 3,400 yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. We'll obviously be diving into them. And I think the big thing that happened to their offense last year, Jonathan Brooks, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns, tore ACL. And I think that kind of hurt them down the stretch to have that extra guy with them. But overall, fantastic season for this team. Now, heading to 2024, though, there's some lofty-ass expectations out there. People are talking about them being national title contenders. And I know that is one of those things is like, hey, will they – there's always that thing in the back of the mind. Even for me, I love Texas just as a college football fan, just with Vince Young. That team was one of my favorites watching it. And there's always that thing as the last 10 years, like, well, are they back or was it that 1 year? Or can they continue to be back, especially in the SEC? And offensively, I think a lot of people are really liking what they can do out there. When you're looking at their offense last year, they averaged 5.8 points per game, was number 13th in the country. Yards per game, they were a top 10 unit at 455 yards. From a passing perspective, they were very, very good last year. Quinn Ewers was good. When you're looking at yards per pass, they were a top 20 unit there. Passes per game, they didn't necessarily, they were a top 50 unit. They were really efficient, though. Completion percentage was one of the best in the country last year. Now, they got some new wide receivers that we're pretty excited about. We're going to get diving into them. However, they did suffer an injury, so we're going to be talking about that just happened in camp. So, Christian, what do we take away from their offense heading into 2024?
Yeah, I think everything starts with Quinn Ewers, of course. Having CJ Baxter back there would have made that a little bit easier. Yeah. That's the injury that you're talking about where he's out for the season. It's a 6 to 8 month recovery, I think I remember seeing. And so that's a huge hit. We saw what that offense looked like down the stretch. And while they got some transfer wide receivers, that's for sure. I'm curious to see if this group can live up to the Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell duo that was out there last year. Reports are good, though. I mean, Isaiah Bond, we know what Isaiah Bond is from his time in Alabama, and Alabama didn't even use him correctly. I think he's got immense upside in this offense, specifically with Quinn Ewers' strengths. Silas Bolden is turning some heads. Not surprising. He's an undersized kid, so he's not always on the Devy radar, but he's going to be impactful for this offense. And then Matthew Golden's one of your favorites, I know, where, good route runner. It didn't all come to fruition last year for him, but I think this new scene is going to be good for him, especially when he can play kind of like a secondary or even tertiary role. And then you've still got Jonte Cook, who I still believe in. You've got Ryan Wingo coming in. This wide receiving core might be better than it was last year when all is said and done. Offensive line is looking really good. You've got Kelvin Banks and Jake Majors specifically that are coming in and really anchoring the returners on this offensive line. They were a little iffy in run blocking, and I would say that's not Kelvin Banks' strength over at left tackle. So I think my main question for this offense is Jaden Blue going to be enough? Who's that secondary back now? And is he going to be enough to overcome maybe some of the run blocking woes that this offensive line saw last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that from like a Hogs perspective, who they got up front, they got dudes. I mean, Kelvin Banks, Cameron Williams, those guys, they can push guys around, and they're good enough to block in the SEC. Like, they got guys that can block those defensive fronts they're going to face and all of that. You obviously need to improve, right? Like, this was that touted freshman class from a couple years ago, and you're probably going to see that improvement from that side. But yeah, I mean, CJ Baxter, that's a big loss. I mean, he was one of the best running backs coming out last year as a freshman. Had some moments last year down the stretch after Brooks got injured, like, whoa, Baxter, okay, he's got that different space. Now, I do like Jaden Blue. I even talked about them being more 1A, 1B this year too. It's just, okay, what's next? Like what comes back in that room there? And I think what biggest thing is Jared Gibson. I think, the recruit number 3 rated running back coming in the class. We'll get into him in a little bit. He might have a little bit more run this year. Like he might be that guy you're like, oh, okay, they're going to have to do that. That is nice about Sark. He's recruiting at a top 5 level every year, where it's kind of similar to these big programs now. It's like, okay, we lost some guys, let's plug in. And I think that is a very, very kind of key factor there. It all starts with Quinn, though, and it ends with Quinn. Like Quinn's got to be that got to be more consistent this year. Losses on their side, they had some losses, like on offensive side when you're talking about it. Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Jonathan Brooks, Christian Jones, Jatavian Sanders, Jordan Whittington is a bigger loss than people think. I love Jordan Whittington. He was an absolute glue guy for them. Like he was that leadership in that room on that offensive side, did all the little things, blocking, possession, even could be a deep threat at times. Like if he needed to, he kind of gave him that key leadership role there. Obviously offensively, Worthy and Mitchell being there, they replenished that. But I do think Jonathan Brooks, based on the injury to CJ Baxter and all of that, that running back room is a huge, huge mystery right now.
Yeah, I think losing Christian Jones is a pretty impactful thing until you look at what Cameron Williams did when he did see some snaps last year, and you're like, all right, they'll be all right. The tight end position is a little iffy right now. They did get Amari Knee-Block in to hopefully give that pass catching role a little bit more juice. But really, with the 3 wide receivers now, I think you're looking at more wide receiver production. I'm glad you mentioned Whittington. Did you see he's doing well in camp too? He just turned some heads in their preseason game, so good for them. This wide receiving core was great last year. I think it's up to these new guys to kind of fix that gap, close that gap, and make sure that Quinn Ewers can still be productive for them this year.
Yeah, 100%. And from the recruiting trail, like we talked about, number 5 overall, Sark's been cooking on recruiting. Like he's done a great job there. Composite rank was 6, so he is right there. And Ryan Wingo is a guy that, he's special. He can be special in this offense. It's funny because they really are recruiting that wide receiver position very, very well. Aaron Butler is just as good when you look at him. Number 31 ranked wide receiver, but hey, fits a need, and he does a really good job there. Brandon Baker, offensive tackle, 6'5", 285. Number 3 recruit there. Could definitely fill a role there, especially when they lose some tackles. I know that is probably a big emphasis on the recruiting trail this year. We talked about Gibson, Trey Owens, Jordan Washington. They do a great job. They get some good guys here. Defensively, they really attacked it. They did a great job grabbing a guy like Colin Simmons, who we'll mention later. But offensively, filled needs, got some guys. And if Ryan Wingo pans out, this Texas wide receiver room could really see a big bump next year.
Yeah, I like Wingo. I'm curious to see what his path to snaps looks like.
Yeah.
That room's loaded, and hopefully he sticks around and we kind of see that. Same thing with Butler. I really like Trey Owens. I like Owens more than I thought I would for a guy of his size. I also just like betting on yourself, going where Arch Manning is sitting, waiting in the wings, and saying, I'm going to go compete for that job. After Quinn leaves, I think that's an honorable thing. I think he's going to lose that competition, but I think he'll stick it out, and I think he's pretty invested in the Texas program. So good on him. This is a good class. The defensive side is what I'm excited about, though.
Yeah, 100%. And when you look at transfers, I mean, we like Isaiah Bond. I think Isaiah Bond is their wide receiver 1. I think Isaiah Bond last year, when you look at Alabama, didn't necessarily use him in the right ways. I think from a passing perspective, they were limited with Milroe being there. All of those things. Open it up now with Quinn Ewers and Sark's ability to scheme open guys, right? We think of like Devonta Smith at Alabama, those type of guys. Bond can be kind of that level of athlete that they can get the ball to. That was a huge get by them. Silas Bolden is a sneaky one. I kind of like Silas Bolden from Oregon State. When you're thinking of him out there, he's fun. He could be in the slot. He's versatile, can play X as well, getting on the outside. I'm a big Matthew Golden guy, have been for a while. I think he fills just he fills that Whittington role, I think. A 6'1", 190 can come in and kind of do a lot of different things for them. And you mentioned Amari Knee-Block is also coming over from Alabama.
A lot of separators here, man. Like all 3 of these dudes can get open, and the best part is they don't really have to all that much because of like you're saying about Sark. So this is a great transfer class. I mean, they went and they said we're losing 2 first-round talents. I know Ad and I didn't go there, but we're losing 2 top-end wide receivers. Let's go get 3 and plug them into our starting lineup right now. I think that's a smart decision, smart move here.
Yeah, and the thing is, when you're going over this, like you can pontificate about Ewers if you like. I mean, Isaiah Bond to me is kind of that linchpin for them, right? Like the production 668 yards last year on 48 catches. When you look at that, you're like, oh, well, how good is he? I'm telling you right now, Isaiah Bond could have easily over 1,000 yards receiving this year in this offense and what he's able to do. His over under, I think, in yards, which I'm going to write an article later, is like 650. Smash the over for me if he stays healthy. Like I don't see a role for him that doesn't see him seeing the targets enough, having an 80 catch, like 1,100 yard season. I think that's in the cards for him. If he does that, he gives that weapon. They need a weapon like that out there. And I know they have a lot of mouths to feed. I know their wide receiver room is deep, but Bond is that special level talent that could be possibly a first round wide receiver. He has that in his bag there. So if he does that, this offense can take off, I think.
Yeah, there are two potential first round players on this list right here, and that's speaking to Quinn Ewers as well. I know there are a lot of folks that are iffy about him because he's pretty non traditional and that like his mechanics are a little iffy and arguably bad at times, but he is as talented as There's a reason he was the number one quarterback recruit of all time at one point. I don't know if he still is, but the talent is there. It's been there. He's supremely accurate. He makes good decisions. If he can just get the stupid deep ball timed up better, because he's got an arm, it's not like he can't throw it. If he can just get that timed up better, everyone's going to have a different opinion nationally of Quinn Ewers. I think Texas fans know this, so I'm just kind of preaching to the choir here. But man, I think this offense has so much potential despite losing all those guys. I think it comes down really to the first two on this list here.
Yeah, if Bo Nix can be a first round draft pick, you cannot sit here and tell me that Quinn Ewers can't be a first round draft pick. Like, and shout out Bo Nix. He did a great job last year. He developed, he did those things. But remember, this is Quinn Ewers really his third year. This is really his third year of actually playing. And really, he's been injured, right? There has been that too, where it's like, hey, can you get that full year in there? And I think for Texas fans out there from an offensive perspective, if Ewers goes down, you still got Arch. So like there is like a less like, oh my gosh, we lost Ewers. Now who's going to be out there, right? Now it's, hey, we have Arch Manning here to kind of set up that offense as well. And then from the defensive side, last year, when you're looking at them last year, they were a top 12 unit in points per game at 18.9 allowed. When you're going over kind of opponent yards per play, they were only 5 yards per play they averaged there was a top 30 unit. The big thing for me is that they got off the field in third down. They were number one in the country last year getting off the field in third down at 25% conversion rate. That's phenomenal. Like, hey, they let their offense kind of get as many opportunities as they can, as many possessions as they could. And that's a big reason why they had success last year. And their rush defense. Whoo, boy, you could not run against this team. They were fantastic. Number 2 in opponent rushing play percentage, opponent yards per rush, 2.9. They were top 5 unit. That just did not happen. Opponent rushes per game at 3. I mean, opponent rushing yards per game, 82 yards they gave up. That's top 3 in the nation last year. Back end, though, they struggled a little bit in that secondary. They gave up some big plays. But from a rushing standpoint, they did not let teams run all over them. And that's huge, especially going to the SEC.
Yeah, and they are obviously losing the two big-time talents at defensive tackle. But the secret that's probably not a secret to most people watching this is Alfred Collins is an outstanding football player. Every time I watched those other two, I was like, man, who's this kid? And it's Alfred Collins always. He's just going to step right in, fill kind of both roles. It's listed here as a nose tackle, but he can get to the quarterback. He's a force, against the run as well. So I think he's going to be a big reason why this defense doesn't really suffer from those losses. Now, Andrew Mukuba coming over from Clemson, massive get to really shore up that secondary. Malik Muhammad was good last year. They're bringing in Javion Cole to start opposite him. I think this team right here is in a better spot. I think, I have some questions about the linebacking room. I think, there were some high expectations for the two starters last year. Didn't really play as well as people hoped, and they're young players there. Anthony Hill Jr. had a ton of hype coming into the year and just didn't really play as well as everyone hoped. So hopefully he takes a step forward this year. Baron Sorrell coming off the edge, I think is going to be good. Trey Moore as well, another transfer in there. I think this defense might not be as stout as last year, but I think we're going to make up for that on offense, and I think this team should still win a ton of games.
Yeah, no, I think they win the national title if they had the offense they're probably going to have this year, last year, and that defense. But that's all right. I mean, the one area you want is a team that can score, right? I mean, that's the big part there. And I think you did mention him. But Anthony Hill, like he was still a freshman All-American last year, second leading tackler. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he might not have lived up to those expectations, but maybe him moving the middle is going to help. Maybe that's a position for him, and that staff realized that. From a notable losses, yeah, I mean, they lost some guys, right? So, the 2023 Outland Award winner, Sweat, defensive lineman of the year in Byron Murphy, and then two-time first-team all Big 12 middle linebacker Ford. Like, those are big shoes to fill there. And Ryan Watts. I don't want to just throw Ryan Watts out of that level, but those three guys right there, I mean, that is a lot of big part of their defense when you're looking at what they were able to do last year. Sweat, he was huge last year in terms of, total tackles, just in the inside. Like, the teams could not run up the middle, and they just stopped trying. Like, simply they just said, we're not going to do this. We're just going to throw.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, he was huge figuratively and literally. Like, that is a massive dude. Byron Murphy, though, was one of my top 3 players in the class last year. I just an outstanding football player that, I think they're going to be looking to replace that level of pocket disruption. They're taking a lot of shots at guys that can do that, but Byron Murphy was consistently just making quarterbacks uncomfortable. I don't necessarily know that Alfred Collins is going to be enough to kind of replace both of those guys. They're going to need some guys to step up because 2 phenomenal football players, and really add in Jalen Ford in there as well. And it's tough, but this is Texas. They're recruiting well. They're going to have guys that they can plug right in.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they do. Let's talk about some of those guys on this 2020 recruiting class. That they did a great job. I mean, let me be clear about Colin Simmons. I wrote about Colin Simmons last week in our Substack. This dude is one of the best edges linebackers to come to Texas in a very, very long time. When you're looking at him, like, he was phenomenal. 44.5 sacks in high school. That's what they've needed. So as much as the defensive side we talked about with Texas, the last time they had a 5.5 sacks or more was in 2018. So they don't go after the quarterbacks. When you're looking at that kind of guy, Simmons could be that guy when you're talking about his ability. And when you watch the tape, this dude just flies. Like, you see him there. He was absolutely phenomenal, unguardable as a junior. He had 22.5 sacks that season and 15-0. Like, he could be that kind of that Gary Johnson-esque type guy for Texas out there. Not to say Kobe Black, these other guys here, Wardell Mack, Smith, Wilson, these other guys aren't there. Simmons is already making waves out there in camp. Like, he's already challenging Finkley and Bassick for second team reps at edge. So he's getting in there already. And I think the one thing for Simmons that I mentioned, he really could just be used as pass rush, a specialty. Like, hey, throwing downs, we're going to get you on this field and we're going to get out the quarterback. And that is, I think, what could help this defense out a lot.
Yeah, 24/7 Sports compared him to Nick Bonito and threw a first-round tag on him. Nick Bonito was one of my favorite players to watch. I know he went to the opponent, the rival over there, but he was a really fun player to watch. And you see that already. Like, I would argue that Colin Simmons looks like Nick Bonito did in his last year in college already. So on top of that, Kobe Black is a dude. I think he's going to work his way onto the field here. They do have a lot of transfers in that corner room, but like, I think Black is going to get some playing time this year. And then you just fill it out with some more 4-stars and really some of these 3-stars that can kind of work in. This is a really, really good class. Those top 2 specifically are 2 of my favorite players to watch in general in the entire recruiting class.
Yeah, no, a fantastic job on the recruiting side over there. Transfers too. I mean, they did a great job. They were number 6 rated transfer class coming in. I think that from a defensive side, Andrew Makuba out there from Clemson. Shout out Clemson, just giving up transfers like that. I think that was a great gift there. Bill Norton from Arizona. When you're looking at him and what he's going to be able to bring there, 6'6", 285. Like, when you're looking at, you're trying to find a guy to fill up the middle. I mean, Bill Norton could be that guy for you there. Blackshire as well, coming over from Alabama. Like, these are the type of guys that you have to get in that line. And I think even Savia from Arizona too, 6'3", 265. So I think they did a good job of just filling gaps. Now, you got to see that progression. You're going to have to see that development. But they did a great job in that transfer portal.
Yeah, Bill Norton's one of those guys. Like, I didn't mention him a whole lot on the defensive depth chart, but like, he's your big guy that plugs up the middle. He's not probably getting into the backfield as much. You're hoping that Alfred Collins can kind of take that role on, but Norton will be a pretty big factor on the inside of that defensive line. Javion Cole, coming in, transferring from a smaller school. I think it's a battle to move into the SEC, but he's looking like he's going to do it. I think he is going to start for them, which is a good sign. And then Makuba, he's been great. I think he probably could have declared and been a highly rated draft prospect last year. So we'll see what Trey Moore can give them as well. But overall, really good transfer class. I think they really went hard. They went hard on offense to get those wide receivers, but like they really went hard to just fill out the whole roster on the defensive side, which I really respect. I think it's a good way to do it.
It's a good combination of filling it out and then also having some depth there they can kind of keep the guys fresh as well when you're looking at that defensive line. From an impact players, who's your guy? Who do you think out there is the guy you're like, hey, got to really step up for this defense to kind of get him back in the playoff?
Yeah, I just keep talking about him, but it's Alfred Collins to me. Just the way they relied on those two defensive tackles, and Collins was a big part of that last year. But I think just elevating his game, he's an experienced player. He's gonna have a lot of snaps this year. They do like to rotate their defensive linemen a ton, but I think if he can be that game wrecking type of player, which was all over the film last year, but if he can continue that, I think that gives this defense another level because then that stuff, you're not able to send doubles at guys coming off the edge. You have to worry about the guy coming up the middle. Collins is that. It's just, can he take on a larger workload? I think he can. I think he's going to be a big reason why Texas is successful on defense this year.
Yeah, I mean the guy that I he's not on here. He could have been, but Malik Muhammad, cornerback out there. I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see. I think they really got to shore up that back in the secondary out there, and he got a ton of snaps last year. He's number 8 in total snaps, so he has that kind of when you're thinking about him. Hey, can he really kind of step up for them? I think he can. He's a second-year guy now, and he can really take that next level. And he was 79.9 coverage grade from PFF, which was the best on the team last year. So he can definitely have that coverage size there. So if he takes that next step too, along with that defensive line. If that secondary could just be a little better, just get a little bit better there, and they get more pressure on the quarterback. That's where Colin Simmons and some of these other guys come into play. Then this defense could be better as a unit, I think, just overall. Like, hey, maybe they can come in and kind of just be more balanced. Overall, when you look at their schedule, over-under is 10. So it dropped a little bit. It was 10.5, but I did see some movement out there where it's gone to 10 now. Big game early, right? At Michigan. That's the game. That's the game that really is going to it's going to be interesting to see kind of how both these teams are there. To me, that game's coming down to the fronts. Defensive front versus offensive front. And because I think Michigan's defensive front's the best in the country. And we can argue that another day, but I think they are. So if they're playing them, how's that Texas offensive front go? And can they turn Quinn Ewers over? I think that's the game right there. In a nutshell is how well can they block that defensive front there. After that, not a terrible schedule. When UTSA, Louisiana Monroe, Mississippi State, obviously Oklahoma, they would like to get that game back. Versus Georgia is a big one, but at home, so you have to like that. Vanderbilt, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, Texas A&M. 10 feels like the perfect number. That's a push to me. But where are you at with this schedule?
Yeah, man, at Michigan is really tough, and I do think that having we play the quarterback game as we always do, but
yeah,
Quinn Ewers has to elevate his game at Michigan, and so I think that's going to be the differentiator. I think Texas does walk in there and take that win. I think they win against Oklahoma this year because of playing the quarterback game. Love Jackson Arnold, but Quinn Ewers is my QB1 for everyone who didn't know that, but I think they probably lose to Georgia. I think they sweep the rest of their schedule at Texas A&M to end the season, though. That's a fun one, and we're really going to know what Connor Wegman is at that point too, and so that could be a really tough game for them. I'm going to go over. I'm going to say they get to 11 wins and make the college football playoff again.
I'm going to cheat and say push over because I do think 10 is perfect, but I do think that over is probably I'll lean over there as well. I think they're going to go back to the college football playoff for sure. I think this team is talented enough to do that. And I think I like the depth at the quarterback position. If it's Quinn or it's Arch, I think those two guys can lead them there. Michigan's the big one, though. I mean, they lose that game, then you get a little nervous because then they got to beat Georgia, right? And I think that's how close it is. It's not one I'm comfortable betting, but it's definitely out there in the realm of possibility. And to your point about the Michigan one, because there's so much uncertainty with the Michigan quarterback spot, I've heard 3 different starters the last 3 days based on all the stuff that I've read. That could play a role, right? That's going to really look in there, and we'll see how that goes. But overall, I mean, Texas is back. I mean, we can pretty much say that, especially from the recruiting. Next year's 25 class, already a top 10 unit, pretty close, number 12 overall. But there's still a lot of guys out there. They've recruited at a high level. Now in the SEC, I mean, they definitely have the guys that compete there. They can compete this year. And look at that. They were in a college football playoff last year. So Sark's done a great job of getting them back into where they need to be an elite program. And with the expanded playoff, they have a chance to make the playoff every single year. SEC is going to get 4 or 5 teams. Texas should be one of them most years.
Yeah, and I mean, quite frankly, they're just gonna have too much talent. It's the Georgia Alabama effect, right? Like Ohio State, even though they haven't really made it. But it's just that effect where like you're taking shots on so many 4 and 5 star kids that you're gonna have a talented team, especially when you can coach as well as Sark does. When you're able to entice people like Arch Manning to come to Texas, who and he knew that he was going to be sitting for a couple of years.
Yeah.
That's impressive stuff, and that was kind of the moment when I knew Texas was back. But now they're really back. I think they have a shot at winning the national title this year because I think Quinn Ewers is going to elevate some more. I think this offense is going to be good enough. The defense shouldn't take too many steps down. So to me, this is a legit title contender. I'm excited to see what they do this year.
Yeah, let us know, Texas fans. What do you think? Do you think that they are a legitimate title? Are they going there? Playoff? Can they win the SEC? What do you think their over-under is going to be? What are their win totals? We love seeing your projections down there. And then, hey, who do you want to step up on this team? Offensive, defensively? Who are your guys? So we appreciate you guys hanging with us during the series. We've had a lot of fun doing it. But let us know, Texas fans, where are you going into the season? How confident are you?